including the Ukrainian question, which from the very beginning in this coordination was very important, and also the presence of our friends from there. Sergio.
Okay, thank you. And I think we should thank the organizers of the meeting and all the people who worked hard to organize this meeting. I mean, I don't know all the names, but Claudia and Daniela and all these good people that has done a lot of hard work and organizing the meeting. If you thought about the meeting, I can reassure Costas that Marx, I was quoting him yesterday in Italian, in his one of the most political writings, the criticism to the Gotha program, said very clearly that the nation state is the immediate field of the social conflict. And he said, I said so also in manifesto of the Communist Party. So I mean, even Marx, of course for Marx the idea of the nation state, there is a very interesting pamphlet, it was unpublished, but he wrote something on Friedrich List, and was of course very critical of Friedrich List, but at the same time Marx had to recognize that the nation state is the immediate field of the social conflict. So this is very interesting. It's something that we must say to our to the criticism that we receive from the internationalists. I mean, we must propose a new internationalism, I mean, in which each people has the freedom, each working class has the freedom to fight in the most immediate, proximate battlefield, which is your own nation. And you cannot have social conflict if your government has lost the power of economic policy. I mean, if your government has no monetary policy, not fiscal policy, I mean, you don't have a battlefield anymore. But I think that now there is for the Italians, but also those that can read Italian. Yesterday, in Manifesto, the newspaper, who doesn't publish my articles anymore, but published an article by Carlo Galli, which is an important political scientist and is MP for Sinistra Democratica, in which Carlo Galli defends it, which is in favor of the Euro breakup, defended the idea of the nation state as the most immediate proximate field of democracy and of social conflict, because you cannot have a democracy if you don't have social conflict. They go together. So I think that this is an important point of view we share, and we have a new internationalism instead of this utopistic internationalism that some of our comrades in the left are still proposing and defending. I think that we are aware that we are living what we may call a Polanyi moment. Karl Polanyi is Manolo Monereo yesterday was quoting Polanyi, which is another intellectual reference point we have, because Polanyi, writing the Hungarian social anthropologist, wrote in the 40s about the reaction that communities can have against the overpowered of the free market. But he said that the popular reaction to the free market, to the expropriations of any sense of community, etc., can have a left-wing, a progressive. Many of you don't like the word left anymore, but I think it still means something. A progressive direction, I mean the social state, etc. But it might have also a right-wing direction, fascism. And what we see, unfortunately, is that right-wing parties sometimes, certainly not in Italy, sometimes, like in France, right-wing parties are unfortunately using and defending more than the left the social rights of the working class, although, I mean, they only defend the domestic population against they oppose the extension of social rights to the immigrants. So we are living a Polanyi moment. We must encourage the Polanyi moment, the reaction of our populations to the free market, and in Europe, as many of my colleagues here said, in the European Union, the euro are the European expression of this global and free market. I totally agree that we must have Unitarian work. We can have different, we say in English, parole d'ordine, different slogans. I mean, Pexit, Lexit, or whatever. But I mean, you know, this should not be an element of division. Even in Podemos, I will be next Saturday to the summer school of Podemos. And now, the economic responsible of Podemos, which is a good guy, Manolo knows him very well, Nacho Alvarez, invited me, knows very well my positions. He wanted me, you know, to come to the school and so to say something about our position in Podemos. So I mean, this unitarian work must absolutely be done. I fully agree with Kostas that there is a lot to develop our ideas, our proposals. Certainly, one research direction is how to manage any left-wing government. Okay, the first thing is, in Europe, the first thing he has to do is to break up with the euro, and the next Monday, of course. I mean, the idea of Varoufakis that you can disobey the treaties. How can you disobey if you don't have a central bank, if you don't have liquidity? I mean, it's a very practical thing. So we should expect that then you are a country which is alone. And so how can we manage a progressive government, a progressive economic program in a country without an international context which is favorable? There are ideas for instance, the alternative economic strategy of the Labour Party in the 70s. You must have a controlled economy, I mean, import control, capital flows control, wage controls. I mean, you cannot allow, you know, the social conflict to explode immediately. You must move really, and the situation now is more difficult than in the 70s, when you had socialist countries and progressive governments among developing countries. But you can do many things also in foreign policy. But we must study again the idea of an alternative economic strategy based on trade and income policy, and, you know, almost a war economy. Okay, because you will move as a country which is alone in the international context. I think I stop here. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks, Sergio Cesaratto. Our last intervention is Yannis Rachiortis.
Thank you, Sergio.
Take this because this is better.
I think that all of us in this room will have common targets to liberation our people from the domination of the capital, from the multinationals, and from the global dictatorship of the Western powers. And nowadays, precondition for this is a precondition is a bridge to the neoliberal globalization, a reduction of the power of the multinationals, successful resistance to the imperialistic wars. For a small or a moderate country like my country, Greece, not even one of these goals can succeed as long as we continue being members. As long as we continue being members of the EU and NATO.
Yes, go on.
That happens because EU is the most clear example of neoliberal globalization in the world. It is an institution where sovereignty of member states legally is not acceptable. Even the constitutions are considered lower than EU law. The Lisbon Treaties, the directives and the regulations of the Committee and the Council are openly neoliberal, always in favor of the multinationals and of course in favor of the interests of the big member states. On the other hand, NATO, together with the US Army, is the main war instrument of the Western world and an instrument to control the national armed force as well. Our participation to NATO means participation to the imperialist wars. In other words, it is impossible to have normal and peaceful relations with the majority of our neighboring countries as far as we are not NATO members. If anyone believes, like the Euro-communists of the 70s and the 80s, that EU and NATO could be transformed into democratic institutions acting in favor of the working class, they simply do not understand the systemic role of the economic and military integrations in neoliberal globalization. For example, can anybody imagine that an EU member state abolishing austerity policies, although the other 26 continue, or protecting its industrial production in the framework of Lisbon Treaty? Can anybody imagine a NATO member state backing the Syrian legal government or cutting diplomatic relations with the Al-Sisi bloody dictatorship? Conclusion. If we want to see progressive politics in favor of the poor in our countries, we ought, first of all, to exit from the main Western integrations, starting from Eurozone, the EU and NATO. We must fight for its own, every country must fight for its own exit, now, not in the distant future. Brexit was a serious support to this target because it shows that the exit is a possibility, not a dream. We can't wait for the circumstances to mature in all European countries for EU dissolving. If even one country withdraws, it will be a serious support for all. This is our main task now, not after a socialist revolution or I don't know what, as the Communist Party of Greece says. We must fight for the exit because we need strong sovereign countries, not because we are nationalists, but because first, the sovereign state is the only space for class struggle. This is the space to build an economic framework in favor of the poor. Second, because it is easier there to cut the ties between the local elites and their foreign allies. The remote-controlled, common globalized market never was and never will be the place to raise social struggle. Dear comrades, it's clear that the worst condition for the peoples is to continue the global dictatorship of the US and their allies. This led to tens of wars and coups during the last 26 years and will lead to more serious situation as long as the US elite feels that they can declare and win any war, now even a nuclear war. This is the reason why we must stay in favor of a multipolar world. In the foreseeable future, it is vital to work for a multipolar world, even in capitalism. That means to support the strengthening, first of all, Russia and China, in order to avoid a collapse under the Western aggressiveness, the sanctions, and the political pressure as a potential alternative poles of the system. Yes? We must explain to the European audience that the US and its Western allies are preparing new wars not only in Libya, but also in the Russian border and in South China Sea. The Ukrainian coup is the beginning, not the end. The activation of the anti-missile shield in Poland, Romania, Black Sea threats to change the nuclear balance. Now the US arrogantly believe that they can keep the opponent's nuclear response far away from their country. That will lead to new Western aggressions, especially under Clinton's administration. We must show the imperialistic character of the imperialistic words all over the world. We must support the attempts of alternative international structures or instruments such as new reserve currency, alternative banking and insurance network, and the international cooperation between sovereign states, first of all between neighboring states and institutions. In the rest of the world, this discussion has been open for years, even between governments. In Europe, there is only individual voices. Leftist parties have been transformed into systemic left wings, and this is not going to change. The activists who want to promote such alternatives have to build new political instruments, parties, institutions, international networks, etc., which will bind themselves to the liberation of their countries in favor of the poor strata. Thank you.
So, thanks to all of you. I think this debate is very important and is a dialogue between different forces. And I want to close with an anecdote. We published a book recently on this topic.